For 15 years, the hunt never ended. Across the outer systems, in trade stations, war zones, broken moons, and silent planets, people spoke about the same story. They spoke in low voices, with fear and wonder. An alien huntress was chasing one human man, not for days, not for months. For 15 long years, many thought it was impossible. Humans were known for many things in the galaxy. They were stubborn. They were brave. They were dangerous when pushed too far. But no one could understand how one man had stayed alive for so long while being hunted by her. The Huntress was not an ordinary tracker. Her name carried weight in military circles, bounty guilds, and criminal networks. She had followed warlords into asteroid storms. She had brought down pirates hiding inside dead stations. She had walked into rebel camps alone and walked out with her target. She was patient, cold, and exact. She did not make the same mistake. Twice, and for 15 years, she had failed to kill one human. That failure became a legend. Some said the human was lucky. Others said he was cursed. A few believed he was more than human, some kind of ghost from an old war, a soldier who could not die. But the truth was simpler and far more dangerous. He was smart. The Huntress first found his trail on a mining moon near the edge of human space. It should have been an easy mission. It's a human survivor from a dead military unit. One target. 1 extraction. 1 clean kill. But when she reached the moon, the camp was already empty. The fire was still warm. The tools were still on the ground. Cup of water still shook from recent movement. He had been there moments before. That was the first time she understood what kind of prey he was. He never stayed too long. He never moved in a straight line. He crossed borders no sane man would cross. He vanished into war zones, pirate sectors, radiation belts, frozen colonies, and ruins left behind by older species. Sometimes she found blood. Sometimes she found broken gear. Once she found the body of a mercenary team sent after him. They had not died fast. Still, he was always gone. Years passed, the mission should have ended. Most hunters would have given up. Most commanders would have reassigned her. But she stayed on the trail. At first, it was duty. Then pride. Then something darker. Obsession. She learned his patterns, but never fully. He moved like a soldier, but he did not think like one. He could disappear into a crowd, survive in empty wastelands, and fight only when he had no other choice. More than once, the Huntress came close enough to see him. A tall human in worn combat gear, a face marked by age, old scars, and long silence, eyes that never looked afraid. That part she hated most. Every hunted thing showed fear in the end. Every target had a breaking point, but not him. Even after years of running, after hunger, wounds, and loss, he still looked at the galaxy like it had not beaten him yet. That made the Huntress angry. On one desert world, she followed him through 3 days of heat and red storms. She found his shelter in a canyon, but it was empty. Inside, she found a dead drone, 2 spent power cells, and a message burned into the metal wall with a plasma blade. Too slow, she stared at those words for a long time. On a frozen station orbiting a gas giant, she tracked him level by level through dark halls and broken doors. She found signs of close fighting, blood on the floor, a damaged security bot, a dropped knife. She was sure he was cornered. Then the station lost power. For 11 minutes. Everything went black. When the lights came back, he was gone. Only one thing remained, a small metal tag hanging from a wire above the exit hatch. It turned slowly in the cold air. She pulled it down and read the scratched words. Keep chasing from that day on. She stopped seeing him as prey. He was challenging her. The galaxy changed around them. Borders moved. Wars ended. New wars began. Stations were built and destroyed. Empires made promises and broke them. Through all of it, the hunt continued, and everywhere she went, she found signs that did not make sense. He left trails that were. To clear, he vanished from places where escape should have been impossible at times. It almost seemed like he wanted her to follow. That thought stayed with her. Years later, on the edge of a dead sector, she finally picked up his signal again. Weak, broken, old. It came from a forgotten planet covered in ash, black stone, and the bones of an ancient battlefield. No cities, no active ports. No life signs beyond the ruins. A grave of a world. She stood inside her ship as the planet filled the forward screen. Gray clouds twisted over dead land. Lightning flashed without sound. The surface looked wounded, as if the world itself had once tried to survive and failed. Her scanner confirmed the signal again. It was him. For the first time in many years, he had stopped moving. The Huntress narrowed her eyes and stared at the world below. Something felt wrong. After 15 years of running, why would he stop here? Why would he choose a dead planet with no way out? Her hand rested on the grip of her weapon. Maybe he was injured. Maybe he was tired. Or maybe, for the first time, he was ready to fight. She took her shuttle down through the ash clouds and landed on a plain of cracked black earth. The wind outside was cold and carried the smell asterisk. The human did not move. He stood on the ridge as if he had been waiting there for hours, maybe longer. Ash drifted around him in slow gray waves. The dead wind pulled at his coat, but his feet stayed, fixed on the black ground. Behind him, under the weak light of the storm-filled sky, the Huntress could now see the shapes in the earth, graves 9 of them. They were simple. No stone markers, no metal names. Just long raised lines of dark soil, placed side by side in a straight row. The ground around them looked old, but not ancient. Someone had dug them by hand. The Huntress slowed her steps. For 15 years, she had imagined this moment. She had imagined him wounded, desperate, hiding in fear. She had imagined the final chase, the final shot, the final breath. But she had never imagined this. He looked calm. No, not calm. Ready, her boots pressed into the ash as she climbed the last part of the ridge. Her weapon remained low, but active. Her eyes moved across the land, checking every broken stone, every shallow trench, every line in the dust. The place was too open, too silent. She did not like silence. The human watched her come closer. His face was older than the last time she had seen it clearly. New scars marked his jaw and forehead. His hair had more gray in it now. But his eyes had not changed. They were steady, sharp, and fully awake. No fear that angered her more than she expected. "You took your time," she said. Her voice was cold and flat, but the wind almost stole it. The human gave the smallest smile. "You're right on time," he said. The words were simple, but something about the way he said them made the air feel heavier. He was not surprised to see her. He was not relieved that the running was over. He sounded like a man welcoming a guest. The Huntress stopped 10 steps away. Now she could see the graves more clearly. The dirt was packed hard. At the head of each grave stood a short piece of black metal pushed into the ground like a marker. Some were bent, some were burned. One still had dry red stains on it. Her hand tightened on her weapon. The human lifted one arm and pointed. "Behind him, 9 are buried here," he said. His voice stayed quiet, almost respectful. "You're next." The Huntress did not answer. At once, for a second, the dead world seemed to go even quieter. No birds, no machines. No movement beyond the slow ash in the air. She had stood in ambush zones before. She had walked through battlefields after the shooting stopped. This silence felt different. It did not feel empty. It felt like the planet was holding its breath. She looked at the graves again. "Who are they?" she asked. The human lowered his arm. "People who thought they were hunting me?" She studied his face for any sign of a lie, any shake in his breathing, any twitch in his eyes. She saw none. He looked tired, yes. Older, yes. But not broken. Not cornered. That was wrong. Everything about this moment was wrong. Her suit gave a soft pulse against her skin as her system scanned the ridge. Heat traces, metal traces, motion paths. Pressure changes. But the readings came back weak and broken, full of static. The storm above was interfering with the signal. Or something else was. "You expect me to believe that?" she asked. "I don't care what you believe," the human said. Another gust of wind pushed ash across the graves. For a moment, one of the metal markers became fully visible. The Huntress saw old cuts on it, lines scratched by a blade. Not random. Damage. Marks, count marks. Her eyes narrowed. The human noticed. "They all thought I was running," he said. That was their first mistake. The Huntress raised her weapon a little higher. "And your last mistake was stopping." The human gave a short, humorless laugh. "You still think I stopped because I had no choice?" He took one slow step to the side, not toward her, not away from her, just enough to clear her view of the graves. Now she could see that the row was not complete. There was space for one more. A fresh patch of earth waited at the end of the line. For the first time in many years, a cold feeling moved through her chest. She hated it at once. Her finger touched the trigger guard. "You built this for me." "For all of you," he said. "But yes, the last one is yours." The Huntress snapped her weapon fully up, aiming at the center of his chest. The move was fast, clean, practiced over a lifetime. But the human did not flinch. His eyes stayed on hers, and somehow that made the weapon feel lighter, less certain. "You should have shot me."
The click was small, too small for a normal ear to notice in the wind. But the Huntress heard it. Years of training took control before thought could catch up. She threw herself sideways, twisting in the air as the black ground split open beneath her. A burst of fire and broken stone exploded upward. Heat slammed into her armor. Ashen metal shards filled the air. She hit the ground hard, rolled once, and came up on one knee with her weapon ready. The place where she had been standing was now a burning hole in the ridge. The human was gone. For one sharp second, anger cut through her fear. She fired at the last place she had seen him. 3 bright shots crossed the ash-filled air and struck empty rock. No blood, no body, only silence. Then something moved to her right. She turned and fired again, but it was only a metal post falling from one of the graves. It hit the ground and rolled into the dust. The human had vanished as if the planet had swallowed him. The Huntress backed away from the crater, her breathing steady but hard. Her visor was still filled with static. Her ship was offline. Her drones were blind. Her map was dead. Every tool she trusted was failing one by one. He had planned this. That truth settled into her mind with cold. Wait. This was not a trap built in panic. This was not a last stand made by a tired man with nothing left. Every step of this meeting had been prepared. Every line, every grave, every sound in the dirt had been placed for effect. He had wanted her afraid. A low metallic groan rolled through the ridge again, deeper this time. Old machines were waking under the ground. She could feel the vibration through her boots. Dust slipped down cracks in the black stone. Somewhere beneath her, buried systems were turning on after years of sleep. Huntress moved fast, leaving the row of graves behind. She dropped behind a line of broken rocks and scanned the slope below. The dead planet opened before her in long gray plains, cut by trenches and rusted remains of ancient war machines. Half-buried towers rose like broken teeth from the ash. This had once been a battlefield. Now it was his battlefield. A flash of movement appeared near the bottom of the ridge. The human moved between two shattered vehicle frames, low and quick, using the land for cover. He was not running blindly. He knew the terrain too well. He knew where she would look. He knew where she would shoot. She fired once. The blast struck metal near his shoulder and threw sparks into the air. He did not return fire. He just disappeared. Into the ruins again. That almost made her more angry than if he had shot back. He was controlling the pace. She changed position at once. Staying still meant dying on ground he understood better than she did. She moved down the ridge in a wide line, careful with every step now, watching for disturbed ash, hidden wires, loose stones, anything unnatural. Twice she stopped just before stepping into areas where the dust looked too smooth. More mines. He had prepared the paths in advance. The Huntress reached the remains of an old trench and dropped inside. The walls were cracked but deep enough to hide her shape. Burn marks still stained the stone. She touched one with 2 fingers. Old plasma damage. This world had seen real war long ago. Then she saw something half buried in the trench wall. A human helmet. Old. Military design. The front had been split open by a hard impact, and ash had filled the inside. Beside it lay 2 empty shell casings and a rusted badge with no name left on it. She stared for a brief moment. So he had been here before, maybe not just once. The idea sharpened in her mind. He had not chosen this world only because it was dead and empty. This place mattered to him. That made it more dangerous. A sound came from behind her, not a footstep. A voice. You always push forward. The Huntress spun and aimed down the trench. Nothing. The voice had come through an old battlefield speaker fixed high on the broken wall. Small, hidden, easy to miss. Static crackled, then his voice returned. You always trust speed when patience would save you. Her jaw tightened. He was not just trapping her. He was talking to her, pressing on old habits, forcing her to think while under pressure. It was psychological warfare. Human style. Another speaker came alive farther away. For 15 years you learned my trail. A pause, but I learned. You. The Huntress fired at the speaker and shattered it. Pieces of black metal fell into the trench. The silence that followed lasted only 2 seconds before a new voice source opened somewhere ahead. You hate being watched. She moved at once, leaving the trench and climbing through a break in the wall. The open ground beyond was covered in machine bones and torn steel plates. She crossed fast, eyes everywhere. Then she saw it. A symbol scratched into a slab of metal near her path. 3 short lines. 1 long line. 1 short. A field marked. Military. Human. More marks appeared as she moved forward on rocks, broken hulls, old posts. Some were directions, some were warnings. Some were unit signs faded by time. This place had once belonged to human soldiers, maybe. To his soldiers. For the first time, the 9 graves on the ridge felt heavier in her mind. Were they hunters? Or were some of them his dead? Before she could think further, a sharp crack split the air. A round struck the metal beside her head and screamed away into the ash. A round struck the metal beside her hound. Sniper shot. She dropped flat as a second round hit the ground where she had been standing. So he had finally started shooting. Good. That meant he was close. The Huntress crawled behind the wreck of an old armored carrier and forced herself to breathe slowly. She tracked the angle. High left, broken tower. Maybe 200 meters. She looked up through a gap in the metal. There he was. A dark shape standing inside the ribs of a dead watchtower, rifle in hand. Coat moving in the wind. He could have taken a clean headshot. He had missed on purpose. He Wanted her moving. He wanted her alive a little longer. The Huntress felt something deep inside her harden. For 15 years she had chased a target. Now, she understood the truth. She was not hunting a survivor. She was fighting a soldier who had spent 15 years building the perfect kill zone. And she had only seen the first layer of it. The old tower gave way too easily. The metal groaned under her pressure, weakened by rust, weather, and years of forgotten battles. The Huntress reached the level above ground and pulled herself onto a narrow ledge. The air smelled of cold ash, burnt oil, and crushed stone. Below, the dead plain stretched into pale distance. Broken machines lay like giant insects half buried. By time her target was gone, the last place she had seen him, the broken ribs of the watchtower, was empty now. The rifle stock had rested there, and the shape had blocked the wind. But no body remained. Not even an echo of recent motion. Only disturbed dust and a bent rail line where he must have slid away. She told herself to breathe. Her suit hinted again at lost signals. Navigation still failed. Shipcoms remained dead. Drones could not return. She was alone in a place designed for silence, and that fact pressed against her confidence like a weight. A place like this was chosen. That thought arrived like a cold blade drawn inside her mind. Someone did not wander onto the right battlefield by accident. Someone did not gather knowledge of terrain, exits, bunker doors, hidden vents, and firing lanes through simple luck. Long before she had ever learned his name, he had been walking this ground, mapping its bones, studying its traps. He had led her close. The Huntress moved off the ledge and slid into a side corridor where an old stair had collapsed. Her boots landed on a lower floor thick with debris. Here, old lights hung broken from their housings. Shadows belonged to machines instead of people. Her light cut across faded markings on the wall's paint that had survived the years. Symbols that looked like unit tags, shift times, stamped routes. He had lived among this war once, or he had returned again and again, teaching himself what it still remembered. She found a storage room with a heavy door ajar. Inside, piles of rusted gear mixed with newer supplies, sealed rations, stripped power cells, a jacket folded as if someone had used it recently. The cloth still held warmth from a former life. A cracked crate bore a label too faded to read, but the bolt marks were fresh enough to make her slow down. He was not surviving by chance. He had stockpiled here. He had repaired here. He had practiced here. Every skill she saw in him hiding. Timing, tight positioning, the clean use of terrain matched the story written into this dead ruin. She began to understand what 15 years had really been. It had been training for her. Her grip hardened. If that were true, then his earlier calm at the graves was not only pride. It was certainty. He had run in the beginning. Yes, she knew that part. The first trails had been frantic, rushed, smeared by panic. But somewhere along the path, the frightened running had changed into something controlled. He had stopped acting like prey and started shaping the hunt, because a hunter did not always leap at the kill. Sometimes a hunter built the perfect room. Outside, another machine shivered under the ground. The floor trembled once. Dust fell. A toss. Far wall tilted and collapsed with a heavy crash that rang down the old streets. The echoes bounced in strange angles, making her instinct search for locations that were not real. The place had chambers he could use to confuse sound. She pushed onward, through a broken arch and into a wider street where a half-buried carrier lay like a dead monster. Beside it stood a rain-warped control post. Its screen was dark, but its casing had been opened recently. Wires had been reshaped, stripped, and patched with hands that knew exactly what they wanted. Her own equipment chirped again, weak and defeated. He had brought her into a world that killed signal. Now she realized it was more than interference. Power relays were cut. Repeaters had been broken in patterns. Backhaul lines were dead across. The grid paths she could map in her head. He had disabled the bloodstream of modern systems before ever letting her see the ridge. Only old things. Still worked here. Old alarms. Old triggers. Old sensors that responded to heat and pressure instead of codes. And old killers. Cold sensors that responded to heat and pressure instead of codes. And old killers. Sudden vibration ran through the street stones. A narrow door in the ground near a rusted fuel tank shifted by a finger's width. Air hissed out. Cold air. Trapped. Air. Her heart tightened. He could appear anywhere now, even beneath her. A voice returned closer, this time breathless. Controlled, almost amused. You figured out the first part. The Huntress turned fast and fired toward the source. The shot tore through a torn banner and hit deep brick. The voice did not repeat itself. The game continued, and the rules had just shifted again. He was not waiting for her to reach him. He was waiting for her to see what he had already become, and he wanted her to understand, before the end, that she had never been chasing the same man twice. A long tube of dust slid away from the wall, as if a ghost had pushed it. The motion was quiet, but it changed the corridor's balance. The Huntress saw at once that the whole passage was awake. Seams were no longer clean, shadows bent where none should fall, and the air carried a thinner thread of cold that spoke of deep vents and older currents. Beneath her boots, metal plates answered with quick, rounded firmness, alive, humming, and listening. She had stepped into a place meant to be felt rather than seen. Her torch snapped off to save fuel, and perhaps to deny him a clear target. Darkness flooded her eyes, then softened into details once the mind started doing what humans did best, remembering what light had promised. The console edges, the broken rack, the turn of a ramp, the rough mouth of a side sleeve into stone all returned. Her memory became armor now. The human stayed where she last heard him, still giving his voice room to move. You breathe too carefully, he said. That means you are counting losses. She did not answer. Her suit had grown a ghost of itself status. Warnings scattered, power warnings dim, life support steady but isolated. Somewhere the base systems that fed modern gear had been cut behind careful barriers. In their place, older protections held, thermal shutters, pressure locks, air doors, that answered to weight and sound instead of beacons. He had chosen a world that punished the fragile pride of new technology. She reached for a familiar muscle instead, the one that kept a soldier alive when orders turned stale. Her hand slid along the wall and met a painted line, worn smooth. Decoration, a guide, a habit, a promise made long ago that someone else would follow the mark and live. Below it, someone else had carved a little notch, the kind tired fingers made when hands shook, but morale still needed proof. She traced it twice. The groove was real. The ground had held it through storms and time. A blade of light awakened far ahead, not meant for her. It shivered across the floor, then died before it could reveal more than broken metal and a stain on stone. The pattern repeated, guide lights that teased, then vanished. A misdirect, a slow instruction, a delay that turned pressure into mistakes. The Huntress heard the purpose clearly now. This corridor would reward patience and punish swift certainty. Slam sounded above, heavy and dull. She felt the ceiling flex. Dust fell with intent, as though a channel had been opened to make the air dangerous, to force movement, to break stillness into panic. She waited until the last grain stopped sliding. Motion inside these halls invited traps like hands invited. Gloves, when she moved, it was in short, controlled bursts. 6 steps, stop, listen, count the quiet. 6 steps again. Her back stayed near stone when she could manage it. Corners were approached only after her hand had found their shape first. The old rules returned. Never cross a threshold blind. Never assume a wall stopped being useful. Never believe silence was empty without testing it. Her foot nudged a wire that it did not snap, but it shifted taut, anchored. She followed it with fingertips until she found the hook and a tiny weight, a tug line, a sensor. Someone had spent time setting devices that screened through vibration. Another found earlier lay bent and harmless, defeated by rust. Only some would still bite. A voice rose again, closer now, and it held something new beneath the calm breath. Shortened, effort hidden but present. "You feel it," he said. "The place remembers." She pictured him moving through matching dark, tracing the same old marks, using the same step counts, letting younger days teach the last years of his life. The image tightened her anger and her sorrow at once. He had not aged alone. He had lived inside this knowledge, feeding it, guarding it, turning it into a weapon only devotion could sustain. A panel clicked near her knee, not a shot. A gate, a portion of the floor loosened under pressure. Her weight held back by instinct. She shifted and let her palm guide her onto firmer metal. Below, something deep swallowed air. A drop waited with patient spite. She stood and listened. Across the chamber, a new sound rose low, far, like a giant bolt sliding home. The entire skeleton of the ruins seemed to adjust. Barriers aligned. Dead roots ceased to exist. Alternate paths woke. The battlefield changed shape around her without needing fresh light or magic, only locked doors, shift rails, loaded pivots, and memory-driven alarms that needed no network. To obey, her throat went dry. He had brought her into a machine of corridors that tightened as it moved, and the moment she understood that fully, she knew one terrible truth. Escape was still possible, but it would come only if she beat the maze. At its own careful game, a shot cracked nearby, not aimed at her yet, but close enough to make Marrow flinch. The sound told her he had her mapped to space now, not simply to instinct. His calm remained, but he was drawing steel again. The ending approached, and it would not be born from speeches alone. "Stay with it," he called, almost gentle. "This is where the others failed." Then a heavier mechanism ground behind him, swallowing his words for half a second, proof that even his voice now lived inside the moving body of the place he controlled. Her own word came out at last, small but steady in the dark. "I am not them." The corridor shivered once, as if in answer, and another gate above her began to descend. Asterisk. The gate above did not crash. It lowered with the grave weight of something old that had waited years for a purpose. Metal met metal. Dust slipped outward and vanished into side vents that drank it like thirst. The Huntress found herself suddenly boxed into a narrower channel, and the close air tightened around her like a second coat. Still, the panic did not rise as it once had. She had watched fear become simple noise too many steps ago. He had designed this place to teach calm. Even when escape vanished, her hand moved along the wall again, seeking the painted lines she now trusted more than any screen. A fingertip caught a ridge, then a carved arrow, then a second notch made in a hurry, half cut, crooked, with the groove of blade that stopped mid-motion. Someone else had tried to mark a turning and had faltered. Perhaps injury had taken their strength. Perhaps exhaustion had loosened belief. The notch felt like a message left for later travelers. "You are not the first to bleed here." The thought landed with slower gravity than she wanted. 9 graves above. Old helmets in trenches below. Marked routes. Locked rooms. The pull of buried machinery. The clean logic of a man who repeated the same actions until they stopped surprising him. She understood now that the graves were not only warnings of death. They were chapters. They were proof that each chase began with the hunter thinking luck would bend to skill, and ended when luck ran out of space. "Those before you," she said into the dark, more to test her own voice than his. "Did they beg?" The reply did. Not come instantly. When it arrived, it carried a tired honesty that felt harder than anger. Some did. A pause, breath drawn measured, controlled, then released again as if pain had learned boundaries. Some fought hard. Some tried to bargain with words, One tried to make me cry. Another prayed I would remember mercy. One never spoke again after he realized mercy was never part of this. Her throat tightened. She had heard many death stories. Few contained such plain accounting. He was not boasting. He was lining facts up like weights on a scale. What changed you? She asked out another pause longer now. A distant bolt clanged. A chain shifted somewhere to her left, and cool air slid past, carrying grit. The world beneath her kept moving. In small, necessary ways. I stopped thinking this was only about men, he said at last. It became about what you turn into when you are hunted year after year. You learn what you can still hold without breaking. You learn what you must let go. You learn the shape of your own choices after they stop being easy. An ache stirred inside her. She recognized the truth even as it tried to soften her anger. 15 years stripped illusions. It took away youth and illusions of safety, and the comfort of believing pain had limits. Somewhere along the road, he had ceased being only a target and become something made by the chase itself, angled by loss, sharpened by repetition, grounded in the stubborn need to outlast the story others told about him. And he had been gathering ghosts. If those graves held hunters, then they also held dead people he had once stood beside, perhaps former allies, perhaps frightened recruits, perhaps victims of the same wars that birthed her now. Even when he spoke with control, the weight threaded through. The man who buried 9 knew the cost of death too well to pretend it vanished after glory. Her fingers found another marker. 3 strokes, then a slash, then a circle. A unit marking. A variation she had seen earlier near the trench, changed slightly, crossed out, updated. Someone had remained alive long enough to edit the trail. That thought tightened her determination. Survival sometimes depended on outlasting. Even one more moment than you believed possible. A new motion brushed near her shoulder skin of air, the sense of something opening. She shifted before fear could command it. A panel slid aside with a reluctant scrape, revealing a short ramp descending into a wider space. Light did not flood here. The glow came from faint chemical strips along the rim, old and steady, meant for hands in dark. She stepped down. The chamber spread around her in quiet order. Old benches lined one wall, their mounts welded into the stone. Broken lockers leaned together like tired soldiers. A command pedestal waited, its screen dark, its controls clouded but intact. Dust lay thin where hands still touched. At the far end, ropes dangled beside a narrow service door, fresh wear bright on the knots. The fibers bent where grip had been repeated. This was no forgotten graveyard. Room. This was active. He had lived within its routines. He had stored water here, stacked rations, repaired gear, counted days that no calendar praised. The ordinary work of staying alive had been done with patience, and the Huntress understood suddenly that patience could drain an enemy as surely as any blade. A familiar shape waited near the pedestal. A rifle stand, empty, but its frame was scratched with small notches. 9. Clean and straight, then a 10th space left unfinished. A chill moved through her. He spoke again, closer now. No longer hidden behind distance. His voice carried the strain of movement, yet it held that same calm, like a river gone cold but not stopped. When you first chased me, he said, you thought you hunted a frightened one who would break. She lifted her weapon and kept scanning dark corners. Her mind raced. Doors, vent mouths, rail lifts, shadows that promised escape and often delivered traps. I was afraid, he continued. Fear is not a weakness. It is what makes you pay attention. A foot scraped softly, and the sound confirmed he had entered with her. She pivoted, weapon high, but he remained just beyond sight, close enough to touch a story, far enough to hold advantage in this place built for distance and narrow angles. What matters, he said, is whether fear changes you into something stronger or something that only runs. Her throat moved once. Her grip steadied. She saw the truth. of it, and it tightened something inside. The longest war was not fought with surprise. It was fought with the quiet mastery of difficult days, with learning how to stand after each fall, with returning to the same lessons until they became automatic. She had months of chase behind her. He had 15 years. The chamber felt like a final classroom, and he sat now at the teacher's point, patient, wounded perhaps, but still guiding her toward the lesson meant to end her own running. "Listen," he said, and the word carried weight beyond sound. "Before you reach the last step, you deserve to know what those 9 really were, and why you will be different, if you can be." Then, behind her, a lock clicked and a metal ring slid forward with a smooth intention that promised only one thing. The path ahead would narrow until no choice remained but what he chose to allow. And somewhere in the dark beyond, old machinery whimpered awake, as if the place itself had been instructed to move once, and then again, until the hunt settled into its final planned rhythm. The final chamber had no windows. It was round, deep, and built under layers of black stone that had once protected soldiers from orbital fire. The ceiling curved low in some places and high in others, crossed by broken pipes and old support beams. Dim emergency strips still worked along the walls, painting everything in weak red light. The room looked half dead, half alive. At the center stood the human. He no longer hid in shadows. He no longer spoke through old speakers or distant tunnels. He stood in the open, beside a large metal platform stained by age and war. His rifle rested in his hands, but low, not aimed. His coat was torn at the shoulder. Blood had dried along one sleeve. He looked tired, but his eyes were steady. The Huntress stepped into the chamber with her weapon raised. For a moment, neither of them moved. The old machines around them gave small sounds, clicks, hums, deep turning parts below the floor. The whole bunker felt like it was watching. "You wanted me here," the Huntress said. "Yes," the human answered. "Why?" He looked at the far wall for 1 second, where faded military names had been scratched into metal long ago. Then he looked back at her. "Because this is where it started." The Huntress said nothing. He lifted one hand and pointed toward the wall. She followed the motion with her eyes. Under the weak red light, she saw rows of names, old service marks, and unit symbols cut by hand into the steel. Some lines were neat. Others were rough, made in pain or anger. This bunker was human. "Once," he said. "A command shelter, training post, last defense point. My people were here when the war came." His voice did not rise. He did not need it to. "We held this place until there was almost nothing left to hold." The Huntress glanced around again. The benches, the racks, the control station, the old signs on the walls. Now it all felt different. Not just a trap, a grave, a memory, a wound that had never closed. "The 9 graves," she said slowly. "Who are they really?" The human's face hardened, but not with rage. With old pain. "Not all hunters," he said. "Some were. Some were sent after me. Some came for money. Some came because killing me gave them rank. They died here because they made the same mistake. They thought this place belonged to the dead." His fingers tightened on the rifle. "But some of those graves are for people who stood with me. Soldiers, friends, family." The Huntress felt the words land harder than she expected. He had not made a graveyard only for enemies. He had made it for memory. He had spent 15 years carrying the dead, and he had brought her to the one place where he no longer had to carry them alone. "You could have killed me on other worlds," she said. "Yes." "Then why wait?" The human finally raised the rifle halfway. "Not enough to fire. Enough to end the talking if you wished. Because I didn't want you dead," he said. "I wanted you to understand." That answer hit like a harder blow than anger would have. All this time she had believed the chase was about skill, pride, and victory. Hunter and prey, one stronger than the other. One smarter in the end. But standing here, in the red light of a buried war room, she understood how small that thinking had been. He had not spent 15 years escaping death alone. He had spent 15 years bringing death back to the place that made him. A deep alarm tone rolled once through the chamber. The door behind the Huntress locked with a hard metal slam. No more paths. No more tunnels. No more distance. The human lifted the rifle fully. Now the Huntress fired first. Her shot flashed across the chamber and struck the platform beside him, sending sparks into the air. He moved instantly, faster than a tired man should have moved, dropping behind the old command station as his return shot cracked past her shoulder. She turned, slid behind a broken support beam, and fired twice more. One shot hit metal. One vanished. Into the dark. He answered with a single round that struck the beam near her head and filled the air with stone dust. The fight was short and brutal. No wasted words. No wasted motion. She changed angle, using the weak red light to hide the timing of her steps. He moved between old military cover points like he had known them his whole life. Maybe he had. Every wall, every crate, every low barrier in the room fit his body and his memory. He was wounded, yes. Slower than in his prime. But this place removed his weakness and sharpened everything else. The Huntress rushed left, trying to close the distance where her speed and strength would matter more than his planning. That was what he wanted. Her foot crossed a dark line on the floor. A panel beside the wall burst open. A mechanical arm, old but powerful, swung out and slammed into her side with crushing force. Her armor took part of it, but the blow threw her across the chamber. She hit the floor hard, weapon sliding from her hand. Pain exploded through her ribs. She rolled, reaching for the weapon, but the human was already there. He stood over her, breathing hard, rifle aimed at her chest. The red light cut sharp lines across his face. There was no joy in his expression. No cruelty. Only the end of a long task. The Huntress looked up at him and, for the first time in 15 years, saw not prey, not quarry, not target, a man who had survived everything meant to erase him. "You built all this," she whispered. He gave one small nod. "For you?" she asked. "Or for all of them?" His eyes shifted for one brief second toward the names on the wall. For both. The chamber hummed around them. Far above, the dead world turned under its storm clouds. Ash-crossed. The graves on the ridge. The Huntress let out a slow breath. There was still fight in her, but not enough. Not here. Not against a man who had spent 15 years choosing the ground, the path, the time, and the ending. "You were never running," she said. The human's voice was quiet when he answered. Double quotes. No doubt a single shot broke the red silence.